I didn't learn to read until I was about 8 or 9, but at some point in year 4 my mum started reading Harry Potter to me and I just became obsessed. I read all the books and since then I couldn't stop reading. But in the last few years of high school I hardly picked up any books. So last year I made a goal that in 2022 I would read 22 books. And in the end I read over 30. And so I wanted to keep reading a lot through all of 2023 as well. And I've been keeping a reading journal since last year to kind of keep track of all of these books that I'm reading. And I realised that I've read 10 books already. It's not even the end of February and I've already read a third of all the books I read last year. So that kind of just fueled my desire to keep reading more and more and more. So I have 2 weeks until I begin my adventure across Europe and I have a massive stack of books. And so my goal is to read as many as possible before I leave. I'm already most of the way through Atomic Habits. I've read this before, but again, maybe in like year 11 when my head wasn't really in the right place and I couldn't really action any of the stuff I was reading. But I've been rereading it and it's really making me focus on my daily habits, my daily routine. When I go traveling, I really want to have a daily morning routine. Like everything else is going to be changing. I need something that's at least stable and the same. The problem is, I just read into the early morning. For example, last week I started reading A Court of Thorns and Roses at like 9 PM and I read until 4 AM when I finished the book. And the problem is, it wasn't even a good book. I personally didn't like the book very much, but it's also the kind of book that you can't put down. You want to know what happens to the characters, even if you don't like the direction the author's taking them in. It's great because I read an entire book in a day, but it really messes me up not sleeping properly. So that is something I need to fix, and I think this book is going to help me a lot in achieving that. Okay, these are all the quotes that I thought were interesting and I wanted to record. So now I've got to take all of these quotes and add them to my reading journal so that I can look back on the ones that I want without having to flick through this entire book. But I've been doing that for all of my books since the beginning of last year, and it's really cool to see all the books I've read and what I thought of them. I've read so many this year already, it's crazy. And these are all the ones I read last year. As someone who's always loved history, it's very interesting to read this book. He kind of uses each place he goes to really make these complex connections between people and places. And then he'll just start on a different topic that seems almost random, about a boy's life living with his parents in exile and then becoming a sea captain. And then somewhere along the line he somehow ends up in the place that this guy currently is, and then leading an expedition down into the Congo. Then in turn starts talking about the horrid things that happened there, and everything just kind of flows and connects, and you don't realise it at first until something clicks and you're like, ah. So I'm about 118 pages into this book, and already a decent chunk of it has been dedicated to the horrid ways that humans fight and kill and destroy each other and other people's cultures and use their power to exploit other people. It really kind of makes me saddened by the human race. It's a bit much. I was working this morning and I have work this afternoon, and I just realised I forgot half my stuff. I don't know where my towel ended up, but I can't be bothered going home, and so I'm just chilling here reading my book. It's a bit hard to wrap my head around some passages, but some of them are very insightful. Lots of interesting, cool quotes and existential thoughts. So it's definitely, I think, my kind of book, but there are some parts of it that just go straight over my head. But I think this week is going to be great at just slowing down. I really did not think through everything that I needed to bring for work this afternoon, and I'm going to suffer for it. I only just realised that this book's a translation from German. I knew English was his second language, and yet it never occurred to me that he wrote this book in his first language and that it was actually translated by someone else. The text telling me who it was translated by is right under the part I read about his life. I just somehow was completely oblivious to it. I haven't read too many translated works, but it always intrigues me how easy it is for language to be interpreted differently by different people, and how one translation of a text can be completely different to another translation due to the person translating it, and their history and understanding and perspective on the world gets transferred through their translation. So in the end, you have two perspectives kind of interwoven, like the one of the original author and the one of the person translating the work. But also, can we just look at this cover? It's literally two fish, which kind of makes sense because it's probably a herring, and that's briefly mentioned as one of the many things that this book covers, but it is so weird. I love it, it's so weird. I think my goal in life is to be able to quote passages from books at will. Just in the middle of a conversation, just in a quote that's word perfect. Once again, St. Nicholas's Day has ever come to our hideaway. It won't be quite as fun, I swear, as the happy day we had last year. Oh, it's Christmas. Yeah. When we were hopeful, no reason to doubt that optimism would win the bout. And by the time this year came around, we'd all be free and safe and sound. So let's not forget it's St. Nicholas's Day, though we've nothing left to give away. We'll have to find something else to do, so everyone please look in their shoe. As each person took their own shoe out of the basket, there was a roar of laughter. Inside each shoe was a little paper parcel addressed to its owner. To me, Anne Frank was very brave to put such thoughts in her diary. I admire her more than I thought I would. She has always been a figure of history I've known about, and yet until today, I've never known her story. She left it in her own words, in her own thoughts. In the diary she talks about wanting to be a writer, that after this war is over, she wants to be a journalist and to change the world with her words. And yet unknowingly, these words that she writes now just in her bedroom have changed the world. And I think how wonderful it is that she's been remembered at all. Interesting.
The technical word calophylla means beautiful leaf.
Hey. Oh, I think Cole's given up.
Oh, you hurt my darling.
It wasn't that much of a walk, Cola. I think distracting myself with books has been quite successful because it's been a week and I haven't really thought about travelling at all. I've just been reading pretty much the whole time. So I finished Atomic Habits, and after giving it about 3 stars, it was just too long. It could have been shorter, and he tried to balance stories and how to implement the techniques he was saying. But really this is just like an entry book to the concepts he's sharing. I feel like you need more resources to actually implement what he's talking about effectively. But after I read that one, I read The Rings of Saturn, and I actually already returned it to the library, so this is just a stand-in book. I really love this book. It's bizarre, it's brilliant. I'd give it 5 stars. I probably would never recommend it to anyone, but I really loved it. I'm not sure how much I would enjoy it if I ever had to reread it, but I would probably be reading an entirely different book if I did, because so many nuances I reckon just went over my head. And then I read The Diary of Anne Frank. The only way I can describe how I feel after reading this book is relief. Relief that this is recognised as such an important piece of literature. I gave this book 5 stars, and I feel the exact same way about it as I feel about To Kill a Mockingbird. the relief at knowing that these are recognised as extremely important pieces, like works of literature in our culture, and that millions of kids read them at school. It helps you deal with what happened to her, knowing that her words live on, and knowing that her diary is recognised for its importance. I will be thinking about sections of this book for the rest of my life. And now I'm currently reading this One Wild and Precious Life. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. I don't know if I really like it. I'm not sure, we'll have to see when I finish the book. It's very time dependent. Like, it's written for people in 2020. Hopefully I'll finish it before I go. I kind of just want to be like, oh yeah, I've read that and this is my thoughts on it, but nah. After reading 2 very phenomenal books, it's kind of just... But anyway, I now have like 5 days until I go, so I really need to start getting back into the mindset and preparing myself to go travelling. But I've had a really great week just reading and hanging out with my family for what will be the last time in a long while. So